Secret Service are protecting people that other people want dead. Now, you think about these serial killers and serial rapists, people who go after kids, for heaven's sakes. There's something beyond wrong with these people. It's evil. You can claim that there's a way to rehabilitate those people. I hope so. I've not seen that. I've not experienced that. Every news article, every media piece that comes out about sex trafficking are behind the curve because it's only gotten worse. Why is that so prevalent in the United States? We enjoy so many freedoms here. It gives bad people the opportunity to do bad stuff. It's not as massive as it seems. It's much worse. The sex offender laws, I called it a patchwork quilt of laws across the country. Counterfeiters before the Secret Service, they could just bounce from one state to another. No one could go across state lines to get them. And sex offenders were the same way. They just bounced from state to state, started abusing kids here and with complete immunity because nobody even knows, because some states weren't reporting it. It wasn't even a felony. Ed brought that to my attention, and I finally confessed to him. I'm a Secret Service agent. I just got off the president's detail. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not even supposed to be here, but I'll tell you this. I'm going to fix this. We're going to find out what it takes to change the laws, to make it better, and to get it right. That's the culture of the Secret Service. Is you don't stop, you don't sleep, you don't eat, you don't do anything fun until it's done.
Tell me how you became an agent. Like, tell me your journey, because I actually know absolutely nothing about that.
Well, it starts with my dad because my dad was an FBI agent.
What?
And my dad got into the FBI because my uncle, his brother-in-law, was an FBI agent. And so that I always had my eyes on that prize. But my dad, in his wisdom, I'll say wisdom, he said, you don't want to do the FBI. You want to do something else. In fact, he made the statement to me, you don't want to do this. You want to be a success in life. And I always thought that was such a strange statement to make. And I understand a little bit better now. But in 1988, Ronald Reagan went to Purdue University. Well, that's where I finished high school, was in that town, West Lafayette, Indiana. My dad, as an FBI agent, was asked to participate in the advance. And he walked away from that so impressed with the Secret Service. From that time on, I was a junior in college at that time. And he said, you do not want to do the FBI. You want to be a Secret Service agent. He said, I know my son. And he said, you with a law degree, which is what I went on to get, he said, you're going to be pigeonholed into white collar crime. He said, with the Secret Service, you get to do a little bit of everything. And he was absolutely right with that advice. I think that was terrific advice that I said, okay, I'll put in an application. And at walking you through the process, the home interview, talking to my wife about what we were getting into, it was all very, very well done.
Well, what's the home interview? Because I think, for a lot of people, they might not know. I know what it is.
Right. Well,
which I don't know if
I don't know any
other
other agency
agencies
that
that do
does this, but as you're approaching being hired, one of the very last steps is an agent comes to your home and they want to see where you live, how you're living. If you do indeed live where you say you live, the background's been done. But the most important part of that is that they get to talk to your family, whoever that might be, and answer any questions. And at that point, they are going to tell you and your significant other the truth about this job, about the Secret Service. And the truth is that this is a very difficult lifestyle to lead. And if you're going into it with a significant other, they need to know what they're getting into.
It's funny. I'm remembering my home interview, and I didn't know what the purpose of a home interview was. And they're like, "Oh, we're going to come do your home interview." And I'm thinking, "Oh, they're going to come look at my home." I didn't know that they come talk to your family. So at the time, I was very young. So I lived at home with my mother and my father, and they both went to their respective jobs. And so in the and I went and I bought like cookies. Like I went to the Greek store and I bought Greek bakery cookies. My mom's like, make sure you buy cookies. They're gonna come to the house. And I cleaned the house. I thought I was gonna show them the whole house and the rooms. Like, look, we're clean. I didn't know. And I remember the person came to do my at-home interview and they sat down and they asked me, "Where's your family?" I said, "They're all at work." Like they were like, and I said, "You want a cookie?" And I didn't realize that that was the purpose. I think for me, it was irrelevant, I guess, at the time because I wasn't, I didn't have a family or anything like that then. But I know you have a law degree, but how did you go from? I guess why did you get a law degree? Did you know you were going to go into the service right away?
No, I really did not know. And so I took my dad and my uncle's advice. They had both gone to law school and they They just beat it into me that you need to go to law school and then you go into your job. And then I bounced around in several different jobs. I was a local cop in Mississippi for a minute. I worked for
KV, I don't know you.
I know. Well, I didn't talk about it much because it didn't last very long. But and then I worked at Sears and Roebuck. I worked at UPS at night. I did a little bit of everything. I worked in loss prevention,
Yes.
and I worked the night shift, and that's when I was in law school. And I tried to carry that on after law school, and they said thanks, but no thanks. So here I am, finished law school. I'm looking for jobs, and most of the police departments I tried to get on were not interested in hiring someone with a law degree because
Why?
they assumed that you were going to not stick around. And you know what?
Oh.
They were probably right. I mean, certainly once they found out, if they did, that my dad was FBI, they're like, well, we're not going to have you. And then I finally found one that said, well, we don't care. We'll take you as long as we can get you. And so that was good. But
And that was you were a police officer again where?
in Jackson, Mississippi.
What's that like?
Well, and I'm not from there, so that was a little different, but it was probably a lot different than a lot of other places. It was a great experience, and I think I can see why being a police officer is probably the one of the best ways to get experience to be a Secret Service agent, because you have to learn to deal with people, all kinds of people in all kinds of scenarios. And I think thinking on your feet is that's just a great asset to have coming in. So, I was always told that former police officers make the best Secret Service agents, and I don't know if I buy that totally, but I do think that they bring more to the academy experience, and they've been there, done that, seen that, so they get a lot of what's going on, and they can apply it quickly. So I think that was an asset.
So what's the most interesting case? You've had like how many years total law enforcement?
24 years total law enforcement. And then I did 2 years of corporate security at a bank, and a great case when I was in Louisville, Kentucky. This guy, I was going to take absolute pleasure in putting in jail because he was a doctor and he was bilking people out of millions of dollars and then gambling the money away. So I went after this doctor, and I got him indicted in Louisville, and of course I got pulled for protection before the case went to trial and all of that. But it was so much fun to take somebody that really needed to go to jail and go after him, and put him on the hot seat, and take his money away from him.
What
We
did
like
he
to take
do?
toys. Well, what his problem was gambling. So
Okay.
he was committing all kinds of fraud on his patients, probably tax fraud, although I'm not sure what happened with that. But then he was also committing bank fraud. And that's when I got involved, because one of the banks in particular, he had gone, and at the time, because he was a doctor, he could do an unsecured signature note for $500,000. So without proving anything, he could fill out some documents with the bank and they'd give him $500,000 cash. So he had to fill out some paperwork, and he had to say what his assets were, what his debts were, and he just lied. He was in serious debt at that point, but he failed to disclose that, still took $500,000, went down the street to the next bank and did the same thing. And so before it was over, he had collected $7 million from local banks who were dumb enough to give him the money. And then he took that straight out to Las Vegas, to Atlantic City, and to the track in Louisville for the Kentucky Derby. He walked around with a satchel full of cash, betting on horses, and of course he blew it all. And so I traced his steps and interviewed people in Louisville, in Las Vegas, and in Atlantic City, and really had him. I kind of had down what he had done, and where the money went, and this guy needed it worse than anyone I'd seen. So that was fun.
Do you think people that there are evil people out there, like based on like all your experience and the people you've been,
Absolutely.
how would you know if somebody was?
I guess there's probably grades of evil, because I mean, on some level, on a spiritual level, we're all evil. I mean, we've all fallen short, I think, of the glory of God. I mean, that's what Scripture says. And then I think there are people who are kind of a step up in evil because they're more intentional. You know, it's not the crime of omission, it's the crime of commission. And to get to the point where you're committing crimes that impact people in such, you know, negative, horrible ways, you've got to overcome some uh, proclivity against that. You know, you think about these serial killers and serial rapists, people who go after kids for heaven's sakes. There's something beyond wrong with these people. It's evil. I don't know how else to couch it, but anyone who would harm a child is evil in my book. And you know, you can claim that there's a way to rehabilitate those people. I hope so. I've not seen that. I've not experienced that. But if you're going after kids, you're evil in my book. If you're intentionally hurting people, those are evil acts. And to the extent that they just don't care, that they uh, go about it again and again and again, well, that's evil in my book.
You know, it's interesting. You said that they don't care. I have my one of my masters is in forensic psychology, and one of the things I learned is that those who commit serial crimes or chronic offenders, one of the things that they lack is empathy. So they don't feel bad when they do something. And there's two mental health disorders that really have that. It is narcissistic personality disorder. And I mean like legitimate narcissistic personality disorder. Today, everybody calls everybody a narcissist. You don't agree with me, you're a narcissist. That's not what I mean. But I mean the true disorder. And then the other disorder where people lack empathy is antisocial
Mm.
personality disorder. And that's where you hear sociopath or psychopath. That falls under that. Lack of empathy is what makes people more prone to commit crime. With that, like you talked about, you brought up kids. How did you get involved with kids? Because I know you do a lot of stuff with kids today. Like you were Secret Service, so you were Secret Service is financial primarily, counterfeit money, stuff like that. So how do you make the leap from what you were doing to the work you do with children? Like how did you exposed to that?
Yeah. You know, there are a few very unique things about the Secret Service. Certainly unique in history, unique in mission set, and unique in culture.
It's
But
like a poster, like apply for the U.S. Secret Service.
we're unique. Yeah,
We
and
are, man. All the other agencies are going to hate it.
they are. That's okay. The
we
haters are
we
gonna
like
hate.
everybody, but it's like we are kind of like super special. I'm
Well, we're
sorry.
it's
It's kind
unique,
of
right? I mean,
the agency is not me.
one of the unique things is the Secret Service engagement with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and so
NECMEC.
NECMEC.
How do you say
I
it?
say NICMEC, but
That's how in the rest of the country we say
the rest of the
NECMEC.
country says NECMEC, and it's like
In
fingernails on a
Alabama, you say
chalkboard. Well, it's NICMEC.
it.
That's fair. The Secret Service has had this engagement with NICMEC all these years, and part of NICMEC's budget is from the government. It's a public-private partnership. It started with John and Revee's Walsh, their son's abduction and murder. And so John and
John
Reve,
Walsh, America's Most Wanted.
yeah,
Yes.
they started the National Center out of the trunk of their car in their home, in their garage.
John Walsh started NECMEC?
He did.
I
He
did not
did.
know this.
And they got the attention of Ronald Reagan, and Reagan was the one who helped get it through Congress. And so it's a public-private partnership. So part of their funding comes from the government, and part of that funding comes through the Secret Service. And so Secret Service, as small as they are, they have a couple of dedicated agents that work at NICMEC. And NICMEC has a room where any law enforcement agency can bring people to participate in the efforts to stop the exploitation and to find missing kids. So it's a wonderful agency with so many different. I mean, NICMEC is as unique in the world of child protection and all of that as the Secret Service is in law enforcement. It's really a special place. When I left the president's detail the first time,
Which was
uh,
which president?
well, I started with President Clinton, and then I was there for the first 4 years of President George W. Bush. So
On the president's detail, GW.
that's right.
Okay, so you
That's
might
right.
have seen me at Waco on a midnight as you
I
were
think I remember you.
I was in one of those shacks in the
Yeah,
back.
yeah. And the week of his second inauguration, which is the photo on the cover of the book, that was my last week. on the president's detail. And then I went to Capitol Hill, and it was something that I'd wanted to do ever since I'd heard one of the senior agents talking about how, again, unique with the Secret Service, we do these fellowships, and you can apply for a fellowship and go up there and serve on one of these committees. So I applied, and I was accepted, and I got placed on Senate Judiciary Committee. And Senator Orrin Hatch was the outgoing chairman of Judiciary Committee, and so all his staff left. So they go with the new chairman, and so he had a big void, and they just happened to approach Senator Hatch to thank him for his service as the chairman and for looking out for the Secret Service. And he said, "Hey, when can I get one of your guys or girls for a detailee?" And they said, "Well, we've got this village idiot sitting over here that would be perfect for you." And so that was the relationship. So that's how I got started over there. And this is a long story. You asked for it, but I did not know when I was working on Hatch's staff that you're supposed to take your leave when they're in recess. So I show up for work and the place is empty. There's an intern manning the front desk because it's still open to the public, but I'm the only one there, and I because I didn't know you were supposed to take your leave then, and so here I am, and in walks Ed Smart, whose daughter Elizabeth had been abducted in Utah, and Elizabeth Smart is the miracle girl who she was abducted, she was raped and abused, and they kept her traveling with them. This crazy couple, trying to turn her into his bride. I mean, it's such a weird, crazy talk about evil. Here's evil.
Brian David Mitchell.
Yes. And many years after Elizabeth has been recovered and restored to her family, Ed comes walking in during recess, and naturally I'm the only one there. So they said, "Yes, we have a staffer here who would love to talk to you." And they called me down, and Ed and I spent the rest of the day talking about sex offender laws and the problem in this country. And at the time, you could be a sex offender in Alabama, and in Alabama, it was, and this is just an example, but it wasn't a felony necessarily to lie to your probation officer about where you lived, to just leave the state and not tell anyone. So the sex offender laws, I called it a patchwork quilt of laws across the country. And they weren't talking to each other. Sex offenders just bounced. It's like counterfeiters before the Secret Service. They could just bounce from one state to another. No one could go across state lines to get them. So it was great. It's a traveling road show where they're doing counterfeit all over the country because no one could stop them. And sex offenders were the same way. They just bounce from state to state. It's a fresh start. We can start abusing kids here and with complete immunity because nobody even knows, because some states weren't reporting it. It wasn't even a felony. So they were winning. And so Ed brought that to my attention, and I finally confessed to him about 4 hours in. I said, "Look, Ed, there's something you need to know now that you and I are best friends, is that I am not a Harvard lawyer up here on Capitol Hill, reset my law practice. I'm a Secret Service agent. I just got off the president's detail. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not even supposed to be here. But I'll tell you this, I'm going to fix this. We're going to find out what it takes to change the laws, to make it better, and to get it right." And I said, and I won't stop until I do. And I think that's the culture of the Secret Service. It's like they just gave me a protection advance to do, and you don't stop, you don't sleep, you don't eat, you don't do anything fun until it's done. And so a year and a half later, I'm still on Capitol Hill, but we're in the Rose Garden signing the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act of 2006.
What did that act say?
What it did is it required the states to elevate all of these crimes that sex offenders commit with respect to their own monitoring, elevate it to a felony.
Okay. So because some states were making it, you're going to talk to me like I'm 5. You would be arrested in a certain state for sexual offense because they labeled it they categorized it or classified it as a misdemeanor, when it's because it's a misdemeanor, it doesn't cross state lines. You don't know. I didn't know this, but if it's a felony, then it crosses state lines. Then this police department from this state knows about it from this state because it's a felony.
That's right.
I
That's
didn't
right.
know this.
It ups the game. It ups the ante for sex offenders to not be in compliance with their own uh, parole, probation, all the restrictions that are placed on them to be in compliance with their own monitoring with the threat of a felony if they didn't comply. And before it was just a misdemeanor or nothing to not comply.
Why do you think states do that? Like, why would you charge like a sexual offense, especially towards a child, as a misdemeanor? Like, it seems
Well, the
odd.
the offense may have not been a misdemeanor, but to fail to update where you're living,
Okay.
that would be the misdemeanor. And
Right.
or
Because you're supposed
nothing.
to tell them where you go.
Yeah.
The sex offender
And so
registry.
we'd like to keep track of where these sex offenders are. You want to know when you move into a neighborhood, are there any sex offenders here? When you have your kids walk the 3 blocks to school, are they passing by a sex offender's house? All of these things you would like to know, but if they just lie or mail in their compliance documents from another state, well, not only does state one not know where their sex offender is, but state two doesn't know they've got one in their midst. So we required the states, if they wanted the burn grants, if they wanted the DOJ money, you got to up your game, and forced basically every state to, and I'm not one of those that wanted to do that, but I thought in this case it's something that needed to be done, and we did it, and we passed it. The novice called the bill the Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act, uh, because I was describing exactly what this proposed bill law was supposed to do. It went back and forth. It passed the Senate twice. It passed the House twice, I think, and the House renamed it, which was wise. They renamed it the Adam Walsh Child Protection Safety Act in honor of John and Revee's son Adam, who was murdered. Of course, they added a whole bunch of stuff to the bill, so it was almost unrecognizable. But the nucleus of the bill was still there, and the intent of it was good, and so out of that came the ability to track sex offenders for you and me. So now, if you go to the Department of Justice website and you go to the sex offender portal thing, you can look up by state, where the sex offenders live.
With regard to NECMEC, because I know you do a lot. One of the things I talk to you about is, why you work these cases, but you brought a case with you today. Like, can you tell me about that case?
Well, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is really frontline, trying to prevent what they can. Certainly in terms of exploitation online, we would like to be able to prevent abductions and kids from being exploited. But the truth is that so much of it happens, and unfortunately, COVID just made the numbers skyrocket.
Why?
I think because everyone was at home and everyone's on their computers, which meant the bad guys were on the computers and they knew that their targets were on their computers. So we saw a shift from going after kids just through Snapchat and WhatsApp and all that kind of stuff to going at them through game consoles. They would start messaging them through the games. Um, they knew the kids were at home, and they knew that if they were at home, mom and dad were probably at home as well during COVID, but distracted, working, doing other stuff, and so they, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. They had the fish were in the barrel. School didn't matter. They were on their computers at home, and so it was like steroids. These sex offenders going after kids, and it worked. I mean, it
How do
just
they do it? How exactly? Okay, you're playing a video game. Like, how do they do it?
well, and I didn't even realize this, but they're on a lot of these online gaming platforms. You can message each other, and of course, you can put out there whoever you want to be. I could say I'm Jeannie Poumpouras, and put your picture up there, and it's me, dirtbag, and these kids don't know, so they think they're talking to some pretty blonde when they're talking to a real bad guy, and they start commiserating about different things. And, you're a 13-year-old girl talking to other girls. Hey, let's meet at the mall. Let's meet in the parking lot at the mall. And I'll be at this kind of car. Just come over to the car when you're ready. And so these kids get lulled into thinking that they've got a friend. and it's someone that they didn't know before. And so the predators really upped their game, and it gave them the opportunity that they didn't have before. They would have to wait, on responses. Well, now during COVID, it was almost immediate, because the kids are online at the time. So many opportunities, and so we saw the numbers just go through the roof in terms of cyberbullying and these attempts to get kids to engage online, to post pictures online. Uh,
Sextortion.
Sextortion. Nick Mick now has a take it down effort where if anyone has posted photos of themselves online that they wish they could take back, well, now you can, and you can actually take them back. Now there are certainly ways that bad guys can capture those and keep them, but if they're out there in circulation, there's a way to take it down. And so Nick Mick developed that in cooperation with the private sector, and offer that for free. It's all free what they do. So Nick Mick is trying to prevent, but then so much of what they do is to go after kids that are now missing. And so there's a huge effort with law enforcement to collaborate and get the word out and be timely, because time is of the essence when a child goes missing. And unfortunately, the case that I brought here is from 2001, and this girl's 15 years old. She lived in Minnesota, and she left a party very, very late at night, early in the morning, and was never seen again. And she vanished without a trace. And we're thinking that somebody out there knows what happened to this girl. And so we're asking for people to call law enforcement. They can call Nick Mick at 1-800-THE-LOST, or they can go to missingkids.org and give an anonymous tip anytime, day or night, 24/7.
You just heard Ken Valentine share the story about Nevaeh Kingbird. Nevaeh's gone missing, and we need your help. Nevaeh went missing in Bemidji, Minnesota on October 22nd, 2021. She was last seen after attending a house party at the Carter Circle area. She was last seen wearing a red Chicago Bulls sweatshirt with a unique headdress logo, jeans, and Nike sandals. Nevaeh left another residence alone around 2 a.m. and has not been seen since. Nevaeh is a Native American female. She's at about 5'5", weighing approximately 120 pounds. Brown hair, brown eyes, with a blonde streak in the front. Distinguished marks on Nevaeh include a scar near her left eyebrow and the back of her left thigh. If you have any information at all about the disappearance of Nevaeh, please contact the Bemidji Police Department directly. You can reach them at 218-333-9111. You can also send tips anonymously at BIAMMU by texting your message to 847411. Really appreciate you. Share this story with others and do what you can to help us bring justice to Nevaeh and her family. When I was watching the clips, I guess there's other kids in that region, other indigenous children that go missing. I have to tell you, I didn't know about this. I learned about this when I went and got my journalism degree at Columbia. I didn't know that there was such a high disappearance rate of children, or I think girls, in indigenous regions. Did you know this? I
Well,
didn't.
it's one of those things that I have learned over time. And I of course I told you about how Ed Smart walked into my life, and it was totally, supposedly random, but I don't believe in randomness, that I got involved in this. And I know way more than I sometimes wish I knew. But I serve on the board of directors at NCMEC, and so I see this stuff, I get briefed on this stuff, and try to help, give them the tools that they need to go out there and help with this stuff. But the truth is that, the assets and resources go out, and they'll get gobbled up by those who know, that know. And so, what we see is in the more remote places where there are fewer resources, fewer police officers, fewer people that are going to, watch America's Most Wanted, or see this on TV, or be aware of this, that have ever even heard of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, that there's an information drop off. And so, whether it's, getting the word out through law enforcement or the media, we're fortunate in this case that CBS picked up that story and ran with it for a short amount of time, but then the information dries up and dies out. And so that's why I so appreciate you being willing to talk about this and put it out there again, because there, this poor girl is somewhere.
It's 2
And
years now.
yeah, well, yeah, 2, 3 years almost. And even, we want to find this girl safe and sound and restore her to her family. But an awful lot of what NCMEC does, in addition to prevention and then trying to do recovery, is forensics. And so in some of these missing child cases where the child is discovered to be deceased, NCMEC will do the forensics to identify that child. And we have a lot of partnership with corporate America that fund it and help, labs that'll do DNA research for us. And we identified a young woman last year that had been missing for 50 years.
What?
And they recovered her remains. We sent it up to the lab. We're able to trace that back, figure it out, and NCMEC just doesn't stop until there's closure on that case. No matter what the closure is, we're looking for closure.
It's interesting. When I was in the New York field office, I worked with NCMEC. And what I would do is I was the liaison for Washington, D.C. and New York. I don't even know how this ended up being me, but I was selected. And people would bring in their kids. We would have kind of like an open house where people would bring their children in, and I would fingerprint their children on the digital
Mm-hmm.
fingerprinting because we had transitioned from ink to digital. And they would bring their children in, and I would fingerprint children. And then I would also take children's photos. And I would do their identifiers, their date of birth, and all that stuff, how tall they were, how much they weighed. And I would give these to the parents. And I'd say, in case you ever need them. Because sometimes what would happen is when kids would disappear, parents didn't have like anything to give police. And
Right.
like even fingerprints, like you would never think, should I fingerprint my kid? And I was always, I admired the parents that could put their personal fears aside and say, I'm going to bring my child in to this New York, Secret Service office and have my kid fingerprinted, and have them collect all this data for me. And we would expunge the data. I collected it to give to the parents so that they could hold on to it just in case something happened to my kid. And we would do this. I would do these events every so often. I would work with the US Secret Service. So I would, so I'm very familiar with NCMEC. And they would do talks at schools as well. They would go to schools, and I did a lot with them. It was, and you have these little kids would come in and like, hi. And I'm like, okay, stand up on the stool. What are you going to do? I'm going to fingerprint you now, and I would make it this fun thing when, the parents are watching it thinking like, I'm doing this.
Right.
Um,
I had the same reaction to fingerprinting my kids, because
did
it's
you
like,
fingerprint
well,
your
I'm
kids?
doing this because of the chance that I might not see them again, and we need some, identification to help find them, locate them. And that was hard, because you're trying to do it with a smile. This is fun. Let's do this. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I hope I never need these. But what a great asset to have, because I can tell you, when the signal goes up and the child is missing, the stuff that you're going to think about and the stuff that you wish you had done is all going to come back. And it's things like that are just preparation for an opportunity you hope you never have.
Can I ask you something like what should I know this is difficult, but what can parents do to like just have stuff? I just remember as we were talking 9/11, I remember I knew Joanna Viotis and she was killed. Well, at the time she was missing and we presumed that she was killed when the first plane hit the tower. And I remember talking to her sister, I had survived and I remember talking to her sister and I said, look, I'm going to see what I can do if we can find Joanna. And one of the things they had me do is we did swabs. I had tell her, go home, get me some swabs from inside the mouth, get me some of Joanna's hair. And there was just some things that I collected from her. Now, I know that was a different scenario. Um, I guess, what can a parent do for, I guess, be prepared? Like, what do you think they could do now that you work with NACMAC?
In terms of child identification, it's current photos, it's fingerprints, and maybe having saved a lock of hair for DNA, or having done the 23andMe type of DNA kits that you can do that preserves that DNA. But I think, I don't know about more important, but I can't, give advice without also suggesting that so much intentionality is required now. These predators are are looking for that moment of opportunity, and if you give them that opportunity, it's such a shame.
So how
But
do you not give them that opportunity?
you've got to know where your kids are. I grew up in the '70s. My parents had no idea where we were during the day, and that was fine for the most part. We were off traipsing around, going to creeks and ponds, and having a big time. And we knew that when the sun got to a certain point, you need to head home because if you were late for supper, you were in big trouble. But these days, predators know where kids are going to go. They know where kids want to congregate. There's a chance that they have targeted your child and that they already are interacting with your child. So you need to know where they're going online. You need to know where they're going physically, and you need to talk to them. I mean, the conversation's got to flow, and if you're not having conversations with your kids, somebody is, and it may not be who you think it is. You think it's a 13-year-old friend from another school, but do you know that? And chances are you don't know that. Do you know that kid's parents that they're talking to? You, it wouldn't hurt to find out.
Everything we've talked about has been pretty hard and a bit doom and gloom. When you find children, how do you take a child who's been through something like this and how do you recover and reintegrate them back into life?
Yeah. The best answer to that is very carefully. These kids, even adults who've been trafficked, these women and girls in particular that are now safe, but what do we do now? That's the question. And so it's an area that so many people right now are trying to get into. They want to help, and that it's such a great problem to have. But places are springing up all over the place that offer to care for trafficked women and girls, and it's not as easy as it sounds. And for all the good intention, the success rate is not that high for rehabilitating these girls in particular. So I very proud. When I left DC and I still had the engagement with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I loved that because that kept a little part of me in the Beltway in DC and where all the things are happening. But I really wanted to plug into where I live, and so I found this local organization, and it turns out to be the nation's largest on-campus rehabilitation home for women and girls that have been recovered from sex trafficking. And it's called the Well House, and they've got a very holistic approach to rehabilitating these girls and these women, and it's a years long effort. And so if they're enabled and willing, they have to be willing to stay on campus. They go through many, many stages of, the grief, the recovery, the identification of, what are the remaining issues, and working through that up to the point where we've got some skills built in, we've got some confidence built in, and that we can then have any hope of returning them to society. But most of the time, it's not just that they were kidnapped and made this animal for people to play with. They've been manipulated mentally. They've been manipulated with drugs. So they've been abused way beyond what our normal imagination would carry. And so the work that has to go into reestablishing them as a human being, and then assuring them that they're safe, and then building back into them the humanity it's a long process. It's a hard process. The success rate is nationally is very low. Most of the girls that get accepted into these homes do not stay, and so it's a hard job. It's a very difficult way to to um, to go about helping, but it is so glorious when it's successful. And the well house has had a lot of success, especially on a, compared to national averages. We'd like for it to be 100%, 100% stay, 100% recover, 100% go back into society, and happily ever after, right? I mean, that's the goal. It's not 100%, and it's heartbreaking, but there's so much trauma done to these girls and to these women that um, it takes a lot of love, it takes a lot of time, and a lot of skilled effort to that goes into that.
I'm curious with the border situation because this keeps coming up actually. Does NECMEC do anything with border? Like, are those numbers actually increasing? Because you hear a lot about what's happening there. Like,
Yeah.
is this a problem?
Well, I think in general terms, and this is not a NCMEC talking point, because I don't actually have the stats in front of me about anything at the border, but I would say in general terms, having an open border is problematic because these cartels now, with the border being the way it is, why wouldn't the cartel? And this is just organized crime. And we know that organized crime is very involved in the human trafficking, sex trafficking, the drugs. Why wouldn't they fill that gap? And so they are. And so we know that they've got mules that come in. And they'll take kids out of here, and there's nobody and nothing that can stop them when if they were to take a group of girls from the United States back to through the border to Mexico that are undocumented, they're gone. There is no documentation of them. There's no way of tracing them. They came here illegally. Now they're abducted and they're being abused. They can do whatever they want because there's who's their advocate. There's nobody that's speaking on their behalf. There's nobody even knows they're here. So it makes it much worse.
It's interesting because 'cause I'm asking you all these questions that lead into negative answers. Not negative, it's just reality. But it's also my habit because I'm always looking for I think as a former interviewer, I'm always looking for the problem in the whole. But any stories that can put a smile on my face because 'cause we've talked about kind of the all the negative things that can happen. Can you throw me a bone, Ken? What positive story do you
Yeah,
have?
yeah. That's the double-edged sword with working in this space and knowing kind of all the facts that are out there to know about people who are abusing kids and abducting kids and molesting kids and killing kids. But Nick Mick does a great job of dealing with that and those realities, but also opening the curtains on the sunshine every now and then. And so we every year we have a Hope Award. We have the Hope Gala and the Hope Awards, and we bring in good news stories. And there are so many. I mean, there. I wish there were as many good news stories as there were bad news stories, but the good news stories are so good. You can go a whole year of all this stuff that you don't want to know about, and then go to the Hope Awards and leave ready to go fight for another year. They're that good, and so there are a couple of examples of uh, of kids who have been recovered from the most awful of circumstances, and what NCMEC does is with their agreement and participation, we have them come tell their story, and it is so encouraging. It's so much fun to hear, say, an Elizabeth Smart get up on stage and tell about having her own kids now and talking about all the good things that she's done in her life because she was driven by some of the dark things that happened in her life. And so we really get to celebrate that and to appreciate that. And if you go to the missingkids.org, uh, that some of those stories are highlighted there, and it's a lot of fun to get encouraged from that and to get the shot of adrenaline you need to keep going and do it again.
I'm actually surprised that we here in the United States have sex trafficking issues. I didn't know this till I went into law enforcement, and even yet, not yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before? I was flying in from Oklahoma City. I go to use the restroom, and in the women's bathroom, I don't know if they're in the men's bathroom, but in the women's bathroom, there's always signs. If you're a victim of trafficking, call this phone number. You're safe. You're this. And how? How is it are we up there? I mean, I don't understand how, given that we're the United States of America, that we have this issue, and is it massive as it seems like it is?
It is, it's not as massive as it seems. It's much worse than it seems. I mean, every news article, every media piece that comes out about sex trafficking that supplies stats are behind the curve because it's only gotten worse. And you know, why is that so prevalent in the United States? I think there are a number of factors that play into that. Number one, we enjoy so many freedoms here. It gives bad people the opportunity to do bad stuff, unfortunately. And if we take our freedoms for granted and we do nothing to help people who are being abused by those same freedoms, so shame on us. The other factor I think that may play into this is just our high standard of living, frankly, because so many of us have access to devices and we think it's so anonymous, and so everyone's on them. Everyone's on devices all the time, and both in terms of your presence online, people know who you are. If we want to find out who you are and what your habits are, it's not that hard to figure out. And then given the fact that we have our head buried in that device so much of the time makes us easy targets. So you're walking to your car in the parking lot, and I know you talk about in Becoming Bulletproof about the need for awareness and the need to protect yourself, and you don't need to have your head down on the way to the car. You can do that inside the car when the doors are locked. But wait until you get there, and so I think the freedoms that we enjoy are, it's a double-edged sword. We've got the freedoms to do all kinds of things and go all kinds of places, but leads people to go places maybe they shouldn't be going, and unfortunately, bad guys are waiting there all the time. I think there's an effort. It feels to me like an effort to downplay, because you think about it, you're a medium-sized town in a medium-sized state, and you're fighting for tourist dollars. You're fighting for the awards that states and countries give away. Who wants to give the award to the place where the sex trafficking happened? So it gets underreported because nobody wants to be on some government statistic with sex trafficking happening in their hometown. But I'm telling you, it happens in every town. And if we were more aware, if we were just wiser to the signs and symptoms of sex trafficking, we would see it everywhere. And it's almost like a curse for me, but I feel like I see signs and symptoms, and and I'll follow up on them, and I haven't been wrong yet.
What are the signs or symptoms?
Well, it's almost like that intuition. It's hard
Yeah.
to tell. I mean, I'll tell you one story about um, I had picked my daughter up from school. She was early high school, and I had some of the boys in the back, and uh, we were we were headed home, and we had to go through this about a mile of wooded area. But before we got to the wooded area, there was this big neighborhood, and there was a school, and so the road narrowed from multiple lane down to just a 2 lane highway through the woods, and I saw the traffic slow down. So it's down to 1 lane of traffic with a turn lane, and I saw traffic slow down, so I slowed down, and then I see a car a couple ahead of me pull over and park in the yellow lines where you're not supposed to park. I'm thinking he's in distress. There's a there he whoever it is, there's a problem with the car. They're lost. Why else would you park right there? You can't leave your car there. So there's a problem. I slowed down and I pulled over, and I just looked as I got up beside the car, and I'm not stopping. I'm just keep going, just want to see what the deal is. And that car was kind of beat up, and it had an out of state tag. And I look to see, especially if it's a woman stranded on the side of the road, I might stop and help. And and I look, and it's a middle-aged man, and he is leaned over his seat into the passenger seat, and he may have had binoculars or something. He's looking, and I look up over the top of his car, and he's looking into the playground. And I said, "Oh, I know what that is. That's a sex offender." And I just had this feeling, that that's not good. So I did the U-turn Laverne, and I came back around and I got in behind him, and he pulled out. So I followed him through the wooded section, and he turned left where we were turning left, and I had my daughter write down the tag. Lo and behold, he turned into my neighborhood. And so I followed him, and I followed him all the way out through my neighborhood until we got to the highway, and he stayed in the straight lane. And it's kind of like, well, I'm either going to call 911 and I don't have much to tell him, or we'll just handle this right now. So I pulled up next to him and I told him to roll his window down. And I shouldn't say this, but I said, "Hey, pal," I said, "Are you lost?" And he said, "No." And I said, "No, you're right. You're not. You know exactly where you are and you know exactly what you're doing. And I do too. And if I ever see your car here again, I'm coming after you." And he said, "Oh, that's not me. That's not what I'm about." And I said, "No, I think it is." And I said, "I better not ever see you in here again." And I called the local PD when I got home and I said, "Hey, here's the deal." And we ran the tag with their help. He was a registered sex offender from another state, was off his Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act rules, which is a felony to be out of state without notifying his handler back in his home state, and we got him arrested for that. So, it's like Spidey sense. There's something you see that's not right. It's like, well, why did you pull over? A little bit of curiosity to say, what's the deal here? And that led to not right, not right, not right. And it wasn't right.
Do you know the top event here in the United States that where we see a lot of human trafficking? There's
Sporting events,
Do you know which one?
the Super Bowl.
Yes. I did a whole news story on it. Super Bowl.
And it's hard to believe that just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, you would think that everyone is paying big dollars to go to the Super Bowl, and we had the World Games in Birmingham, and Nick came to Birmingham to set up shop because they knew sex offenders they're going to flock here for the opportunity to prey upon these victims. So
NYPD has they basically they go on high alert. Like I remember I think one of the Super Bowls was being played here not too long ago.
mhm.
Forget what year it was, and I remember there was this whole thing, task force specifically for human trafficking because of the Super Bowl. Because the Super Bowl, wherever it goes, human trafficking happens.
Yeah. I think too, back to why is this so prevalent here? I think, and I'm almost thinking out loud here, but we have gotten so closed off because of the devices that we don't interact with people. And so you stop at a gas station for gas and go to use the restroom. We don't even pay attention to who's in there. And why does this woman have this look on her face? And if we weren't so busy with our own stuff and just not paying attention, not caring, we would see that she's crying for help, but she can't say it out loud or she's going to get beat up. They had to stop for the restroom too. Perpetrators got to go to the bathroom too.
Yeah.
And they stopped, and they were threatened. If you say anything or you do anything, we'll kill your sister who's still in the truck. I mean, they've got them where they want them. And if we were, wiser to the signs and symptoms, I think we would prevent some of that. But they get away with it too. I mean, they're arrested for these things and they're turned right back loose on the street. So it's a real shame.
Some people speculate that people who are sex offenders, they themselves have experienced some type of abuse. What do you know about that?
Yeah. I hear that a lot. Someone is an abuser, and it turns out that they were themselves a victim of abuse at some time in their life, and that it's such a shame. It's just a vicious cycle that abusers end up abusing. And the way I heard it put in a much less serious context, but still serious, is that hurting people hurt people. And so if you're hurting and that has never been dealt with, then you're maybe more likely to hurt people yourself. Not an excuse in my book, but it is certainly interesting that it seems like that is a part of the equation. And many times when we go back and look at the life of someone who's now an offender, they were a victim or they were abused or um, mistreated themselves. And so you would think that that would make them not want to, it's like having an alcoholic parent. You would run from what caused the problem, but for some reason they fall right into that same pattern.
I wondered about it myself. I would interview cases where there situations like this, not because they were Secret Service cases, but because I would help local police departments. I actually thought I had heard that too, that usually they've been victims. And after looking into it, I found out that it's technically not true. Some have, but some not. So it's a true mixed barrel, and I didn't know, and I can't remember where I had, and I don't know if it was when I was getting my psychology degree or whatnot. And again, I don't know what the data is today, and again, but I didn't know if like NECMEC had known, or if they tracked like offenders in any way.
Yeah, I don't know that they track that. I know I interviewed for lack of a better term when I was working on the Adam Walsh Child Protection Safety Act. I got to be acquaintances with a registered sex offender, and this was a man who had been convicted of molesting kids, and he was an advocate for stricter laws. Yeah, I mean, this guy went on CNN, he went on a lot of shows that would have him and advocated for stronger restrictions, stronger penalties, all this stuff, because he said there's almost no incentive not to, and it's like this need that's created in them for this activity. And once you get the ball rolling, it's so difficult to stop. In fact, he would say that you don't ever stop it. All you can do is curb it. And so one of the things the way that he disciplined himself and helped himself was to make that phone call. So if he was leaving his home state, he would make the phone call to advise that he's leaving, and he would call the town where he's going. He was coming to DC all the time. He would call the DC police and say, "Hey, here's my name. I'm a registered sex offender and I'm coming to town." And it's his way of building in accountability. And he said, that is how you curb a sex offender. You create in them the need, whether it's by law or societally, that they get help. And even if it's just a narrower guardrail for you to operate.
It's interesting how your book came about, because it wasn't a book. These were letters.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you come about writing Cheating Death? I love
Oh.
your title, by the way. Way better than Becoming Bulletproof.
I don't know. I like your
That's a
book.
good, well, thank you. But like the title is like, ooh, that's a good title. How did the book come about?
With 5 kids, and of course we started with one. We didn't have any twins, so
Ken, I have
I
one, and I'm like, I don't know how
yeah,
you did
yeah,
5.
yeah.
I need to talk to your wife.
Yeah, she would be the one to talk to. Um, I think for me, being gone during the day was hard enough. Being gone during the hours when they were awake or not in school, or that you miss by virtue of the job. You're working nights, so you're trying to sleep during the day, and you're missing things, and I recognize that. But it was no more evident than when you went on a foreign trip. What my habit became was, no matter how tired I was, when I got to where we were going, back then you could count on the hotel having stationery, these foreign hotels. I don't think they do that anymore. I don't
No,
know. But I would get
no.
out the hotel stationery, and I would write letters, and I would address them to the kids, different kids, and then I would take them down in the stationery envelope and get the foreign stamps put on them and send them home. And a lot of times I would beat the letters home. The kids would have these letters, and now I still have a stack of these letters that have never been opened. And I give them to them as little gifts. I'll send my daughter one of the letters and I'll put on there happy birthday, because I missed her birthday. I was in Istanbul. I missed your birthday, sorry. And it's on the outside of the letter, birthday. So I'll send it to her for her birthday, and she gets to read the letter all these years later. So I was in this habit, and I'm writing letters, and I felt like such a broken record, because what I found was, when they were young, I would talk about what they were doing. Oh, you started crawling this week, or you started talking this week, or, you you got in big trouble this week, whatever it was. But when it came to advice, I'm like, nah, here's what I did this week and you can do better than this. And, I started doling out advice that they're going to read. And that's when the book actually took off because I started writing advice and it just kept going. And, I was just going on and on. And I started to see themes appear. I was seeing what are now the chapters. And I recognized that there needs to be a division here and a story to go with that and a division here. And at the same time, I wanted to tell them stories that I hadn't told them and tell them about experiences that I had that might relate to what I'm trying to teach or train that they may have never heard before. And so that's how I really divided that up into chapters and then tried to make it interesting with stories from the road and different things that had happened that they might not have heard before. Because I don't know about you, but for me, when I would get home, I didn't I didn't tell stories about what happened that day. I wasn't even thinking about them when they happened that day. And we would be sitting around with friends and someone would say something. And I'd say, oh, that reminds me of the time. And I'd tell this story. And my wife would be like, I've never heard that story before. And I'm like, well, you didn't ask the right question. It wasn't like I was trying to hold it back. I'm just not that gifted storyteller unless it's very intentional or I'm prompted. So that's when the book really got started. Well, I had what I thought was just a document to give the kids. And I was with some of my, I do this thing called Point Man Leadership, and we teach and train leadership and ethics. And one of the co-founders I didn't know him very well, but he was talking to me, asking me about my career, my life, all this stuff. And I told him, but during COVID, I've been doing a lot of writing, and it turns out he had written several books. And long story short, he said, could I take a look at what you wrote? And I said, well, sure. So I gave it to him and he called me up and he said, hey, I've been reading this. He said, if you just want to have this bound and give to the kids, he said, I can recommend a company that'll do that. And you can have a copy for each kid by Christmas. He said, but I think you got something here. He said, this is special. And you really need to look and see if you can't get this published because a lot of people are going to enjoy reading this. So
Why'd you call it cheating death?
well, cheating death was a phrase that we used on the president's detail to kind of lighten the mood about things. And I heard people say, instead of saying, "Oh, nothing," what's going on? Oh, nothing. If they just wanted to kind of skirt the issue and just move on, they'd say, "Ah, just cheating death." And I think it was a good way to remind each other in a kind of a lighthearted way of what might actually happen here because you get in such a routine, even on the president's detail. You're walking in the White House, and I don't know how many times I had to pinch myself and say, "Do you believe you just walked all the way from outside where nobody can get in, all the way right past all this stuff, and here you are to do a job, and oh yeah, I I
And I
might
got weapons on
I
me.
got weapons. I might have to use them today." And so, when we would say heading out to cheat death, or we're cheating death today, or we cheated death today, it's a good way to remind each other of the seriousness of the job and the fact that there are people out there that want your protectee dead. Right now, no matter who it is, Secret Service are protecting people that other people want dead now, if possible. And so the mission, if you're getting soft, you got to get that mission back out in front of you and harden back up. And the mission was about cheating death, and not about who do we
You're not
like.
going to
And
get my person.
you're not going to get my guy, my girl, whoever it is. Yeah. Well, in 2013, 2014, when they finally kicked me off the detail. When I was a shift leader, I remember the boss summoned me from my seat on Air Force One up to the front, and I thought I was either going to get chewed out or uh, an attaboy for it. Either went really well from the boss's perspective or it didn't, and I never was quite sure what what am I going to get? I'm going to get a good hand or a bad hand, And I went up there and the boss said, hey, I need to talk to you about your future. And it's like, oh. And he said, they're asking for you to come to headquarters. And I said, yeah, I bet they are. I said, I don't want to go to headquarters. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to stay right where I'm at. I said, I'll stay here until I retire if you'll let me, which was about 5 years. I was going to be eligible to retire. And he said, no, you can't do that. And we argued about it a little while. The words that he finally said to me that kind of stung was he said, you've been doing this for 2.5 years. He said, nobody does this job more than a year, and there's a reason why. And I've thought he was coming with the burnout thing. And he said, because you need to give other people the opportunity to do this job. And I was like, oh, great. So I've been the selfish one that has had this job for longer than anyone's ever heard of. But I loved it and I didn't want to let it go. And so I relented and I went to headquarters. But the assignment to Philadelphia was without the family. And I got assigned to Philadelphia as what they called a temp assignment. And so they afforded me a little apartment, but it was designed to be temporary. And I could kind of come and go as I needed to back home. It was only 3 hour drive back home. And look, we made lemonade out of lemons because my family loved coming up to Philadelphia, and we would bring sleeping bags and we would crash at my apartment on weekends when they could come up if I couldn't go home. And I could be home in a moment's notice with 3 hours moment.
How were your
But
kids with all of this?
how were they?
Yeah, did they grow up like you always hear stories now, like did they grow up upset or did they adjust well? Like did they say, you weren't around? Like what was that? Did that ever happen?
I've not received the bad end of that conversation yet. I think the moving was certainly a deal, and we can see it with our kids because when you ask them where are you from,
They don't
my
know.
kids don't have a good answer for that, and they will give an answer, but it's not. It doesn't carry the same weight as someone who like me grew up in one place or but kind of like the Philadelphia thing, I think we looked at that to say, well, we're building resilience in our kids. And, my oldest daughter graduated from college and headed off to Chicago without even a thought because she's not afraid of the big city. She's perfectly good with that. And I think that's part of that resilience that's been built in to say, you can do this. We can move around. We can go to new places. We can try new things, and you're going to be okay. And she knew that, so she's a tough kid.
What do you think, like as a parent, like, being that you were a Secret Service agent, I don't know if it's training or experience, what do you think you learned on that job that made you a better parent? Like, I guess what was the most important thing you learned there that you brought home?
A couple of things. One, it made me a great protector. It certainly made me aware. We have to see all kinds of stupid stuff that just happens in this world, and accidents that happen, and you don't want to see that happen to your family. So I think awareness, situational awareness, like you talk about in your book. I mean, that's so important, and most people just don't have that. But I think one of the most practical things that I gained is the ability to tell when my kids are lying to me. And I am a human lie detector, and they know they can't
You
lie
weren't
to
even
me.
a polygrapher and you
I
can do
wasn't a
it.
polygrapher, but it didn't matter. They can't lie to me. So they can try, and they have. But I think, I think a lot of just the law enforcement training and living in that world makes you very in tune to people, and I think it makes you a better listener at times. So I would like to think I brought some good things home too, not just the lie detector.
How'd you know your kids were lying?
There's a lot of body language in lying. I usually didn't ask them questions that I didn't know the answer to anyway. So I was looking for a truthful answer. Um, the read interview technique, very, very valuable. Those questions, I still use them today.
Do you think you should be given a second chance? Whoever did,
Why wouldn't you do
why
that?
wouldn't you do this?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. There's a read like has these questions. I remember when we were given them, and you ask people questions, and then the idea was, depending on how they respond, like it's going to give you insight into whether that person did it or not. So I remember like when it was a crime, and one of the questions would be, "Do you think this person should get a second chance? Whoever did this." Um, so that's interesting that you read it to your kids.
I did. And I think one of the great things maybe just something that I picked up along the way, and I don't even know if I was taught this, but it was just something that I experienced was instead of, you know, hey, kids are going to see what they can get away with. But instead of calling them out on that, I would lead them to tell the truth. And I much preferred that over an accusation. And I remember one incident with another agent where we went over to their house and we left their house with a lot more Legos than we came to their house with. And he called me and asked me about it, and I said, I think I know who the Lego culprit might be. And so I brought him down to the kitchen and I said, we need to have a talk. And we did a little read interview exercise. But what I did, instead of saying, I know you're lying and, I'm going to go search your room right now. We just walked through read and, I got him to the point where he just confessed and he explained why he did it. And that was better to me than, some big fight over, an accusation and you can't prove it, all this stuff. So I liked it much better when we were able to have a conversation that led to the truth versus I know you're lying, admit it, that kind of thing. So
One of the things I learned is too, if somebody's about to lie to you, don't let them finish the lie because once we lie, we feel we get locked into that lie. And even if I want to tell the truth, I won't because I don't want to be a liar. And so one of the things I actually learned is before somebody actually says the lie to me, and I'm especially in the interview room, like, oh, hold on, because I knew they were going to lie to me. And I was like, I didn't want them to get locked in the lie because I knew the moment that they said, I didn't do this, it was going to be that much harder for me to get them to recant. So I would actually always kind of be like, no, we didn't get there yet. That's okay. Because once you get locked into that lie, like people like are committed, like they will die on that lie just because they wouldn't want to be a liar. So it's interesting that you do that. I don't know if you noticed that when you did interviews, if you knew
that's
that.
funny that you bring that up because I remember very well this conversation and I did not invite the lie.
So Ken, I have the book here and this is the book. It's Cheating Death. And you can get this online, Amazon.
Yeah, it's available out there everywhere, both in book form, in electronic, and Audible form as well. And so far,
Still
so
think you
good.
need to read the audiobook. I know that's coming out soon. I'm a proponent of you reading for it. Let me know who I need to call. Like you have this way,
Well,
this
Kevin
soothing.
Costner said he wasn't available, and so I guess I'm second choice. But yeah.
Okay. And then people can find you. We'll put the links below, but people can find you, Kenneth Valentine, and they can find you on LinkedIn and different. We're going to
Yeah.
get you out on social a little bit. And I don't blame you. I had a massive aversion to social too. I never had any social in any way, shape, or form until after I left. Zero, nothing.
Right.
No LinkedIn, absolutely nothing.
Yeah, me too. I may have had LinkedIn right before I left, but I now am available on Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn for sure. And then I have a website, kennethvalentine.com, and that gives you links to if you want to buy the book. Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay.
KB?
Yes.
Amen. Thank you, KB.
You bet.
Always my strongest ability as a child that I can remember, it's when you know something beyond logic. You can't explain it, you just know it, and it turns out to be true. And I would also see spirits on my ceiling, and that would freak me out.
You kept this quiet for a while, but you actually had a government job.
Yes, because I felt like I had to be quote unquote normal.